Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz has warned that unless Hamas frees all hostages held in Gaza by 10th of March, a major ground offensive will be launched in Rafah. This is the first time Israel has said when its troops might enter Gaza's overcrowded southern city. Global opposition is growing to such an attack in Rafah, where some 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering. Earlier, the UN Public Health Agency said a key Gaza hospital, the Nasser Hospital, had ceased to function following an Israeli raid. Now, the Israel Defense Forces entered the complex on Thursday, saying intelligence had indicated that the hostages taken by Hamas were being held there. Speaking on Sunday, Benny Gantz, a former defense minister who's now part of the war cabinet, said the world must know and Hamas leaders must know if by Ramzan our hostages are not home, the fighting will continue everywhere to include the Rafah area. Ramzan, the Islamic holy month of fasting, this year begins on the 10th of March. Gantz added that Israel could act in a coordinated manner, facilitating the evacuation of civilians in dialogue with our American and Egyptian partners to minimize civilian casualties. Gantz's reference to Egypt may serve to heighten speculation that Israel expects some Palestinians to leave the Gaza Strip and seek shelter on the Egyptian side of the border, where the authorities appear to be building a large walled enclosure for this purpose. But Israeli officials haven't given any details of an evacuation plan yet. With exactly 3 weeks to go before the beginning of Ramzan, reports from Rafah say some people have already started leaving. They're heading towards the coast, but most are still waiting, unsure what to do. Despite international pressure, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to launch a ground assault on Rafah to eliminate Hamas gunmen there. Of course, there is growing pressure, as we said, on Israel to minimize civilian casualties and to not go ahead with its ground offensive in Rafah, where more than half the Palestinian population is currently sheltering since the war began on the 7th of October. Now, of course, there have been several talks for a possible ceasefire, but there hasn't been any breakthrough so far over the last several weeks. Meanwhile, sparking a major diplomatic row, Brazilian President Lula da Silva has accused Israel of committing genocide against Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip and compared its actions to Adolf Hitler's campaign to exterminate Jews. He said what's happening in the Gaza Strip is not a war, it's a genocide. It's not a war of soldiers against soldiers, it's a war between a highly prepared army and women and children. As we said, he compared it to what Adolf Hitler did when he decided to kill the Jews. In response, the furious Netanyahu called the Brazilian president's comments shameful and grave and said his government had called in the Brazilian ambassador in protest.
Israel outright rejects international dictates regarding the permanent accord with the Palestinians. Such an accord will be reached only through direct negotiations between the parties without preconditions. Israel will continue to oppose the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. Such a recognition in the wake of the October 7th massacre will grant a huge, unprecedented reward to terrorism and prevent any future peace accord.